contract was for 6 months, isolation pay, hazardous duty bonus, all medical covered. They didn't mention the silence. Not the quiet of a snowy forest or a remote cabin, but the profound, absorbent silence of 2 miles of ancient ice pressing down on everything. The McMurdo briefing was a blur of cold weather gear logistics and radiation safety protocols for the borehole sonar. The real briefing came later, from Shaw, the team lead who de-wintered over 3 times. He looked like a man who'd forgotten how to sleep with both eyes closed. He didn't give me the list right away. The first week was acclimation, learning the labyrinth of the Archimedes station, a series of pressurized modules sunk into the ice shelf like a chain of technological vertebrae. Learning the drill, a thermal needle that melted its way down, inch by eternal inch, capturing pristine ice core samples in sleeves of sterile alloy. The goal was to hit the basal ice, the very bottom where ice met ancient rock, over 2.3 miles down. Samples from there could hold climate data over 1 million years old. That's what the grant proposal said. My reason for being here was simple, a gravity that pulled as surely as the ice. Debt. A PhD in paleoclimatology doesn't pay for itself, and the loans were a crushing constant weight. This contract was a lifeline, a way to erase the financial scar, and maybe, just maybe, get my name on a landmark paper. I was 29, desperate for a fresh start, and arrogant enough to believe the coldest place on Earth couldn't hold anything my rational mind couldn't catalog. On my 8th day, after the evening mess, Shaw slid a laminated sheet across the bolted-down table. It was warm from his hands. The heading simply read, Archimedes Station Deep Drilling Protocol, Operational Addenda. "This isn't in the manual," he said, his voice flat. "It stays in the operational sphere. You didn't discuss it on open comms with McMurdo. You didn't email it. You didn't journal about it. You read it, you memorize it, you follow it. Your life depends on it. The integrity of the sample depends on it." I thought it was a joke, some gruff hazing ritual for the new glaciology tech. I looked at the first item. 1. The drill head thermal camera feed is to be monitored at all times during active drilling. If the feed displays a solid, dark, gray void for a continuous period exceeding 90 seconds, drilling must be halted immediately. Initiate a full-spectrum sonar ping of the borehole. Do not resume drilling until the sonar confirms a solid return from the borehole terminus. No exceptions. I looked up. Shaw's expression was granite. "What is in the void?" I asked, aiming for a tone of amused skepticism. "There is no void," he said, enunciating each word. "The camera is 2 miles down in ice. It is a malfunction. The sonar verifies the ice is still there. We just verify." The list continued. 2. All personnel must wear a digital chronometer synchronized to the station, master clock. Personal cell phone times, laptop times, are not to be referenced for protocol actions. 3. Between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. station time, no solo descents into the drill silo module are permitted. 2-person minimum with continuous radio contact to the main habillor. 4. The distilled water output from the melted ice core is to be collected in the marked blue canisters only. These canisters are to be sealed, inventoried, and stored in Locker 4B in the service corridor. They are not to be analyzed, consumed, or used for any station purpose. Inventory is conducted daily at 7 a.m. 5. If any personnel report hearing a consistent, rhythmic tapping sound described as similar to a metal spoon on ice emanating from the walls, floor, or particularly the plumbing, They are to report immediately to the main hab. All non-essential water use is to cease for 1 hour. 6. The exterior motion sensor logs are to be reviewed every 6 hours. Pay specific attention to sensor array delta, which faces the primary borehole casing. Any movement registration from delta between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. is to be logged with the exact timestamp and ignored. Do not dispatch a team to investigate. 7. No ice core sample retrieved from below the 1.8-mile depth marker is to be exposed to open station air for more than 45 seconds. Transfer from the retrieval sleeve to the vacuum isolation chamber must be completed within this window. 8. The Station S internal carbon dioxide scrubbers produce a low, constant hum. Learn this sound. If the hum ceases for longer than 10 seconds, proceed to the life support control panel and initiate a manual reboot, regardless of what the panel diagnostics indicate. Do this alone. Do not discuss it while performing the action. 9. Personal dreams are not to be shared as casual conversation. Report any recurrent dream involving vertical descent, water pressure, or being observed through ice to Shaw directly. 10. The borehole sonar unit generates a paper roll readout. This readout is to be filed, not recycled. The readout from the previous day is to be compared to the current day S readout at the start of each shift. Look for sonar shadows above the drill head. Discrepancies of less than 10 meters are within margin of error. Discrepancies exceeding 10 meters are to be reported, and a new sonar ping initiated. 11. If you encounter another team member in a module where their schedule does not place them, do not engage them in conversation. Acknowledge them with a nod only, and exit the module within 2 minutes. Report the encounter post-shift. 12. The emergency flare kit in the drill silo is to contain exactly 12 flares. This inventory is checked at shift change. If you count 13, remove the 13th flare. Place it in the marked hazardous materials bin and do not touch it again. If you count 11, close the kit and report the discrepancy. Do not attempt to find the missing flare. 13. All audio, recordings from the borehole hydrophone are considered classified. You may listen to them for tone analysis as per your duties. If you hear a vocalization, any phoneme that resembles human speech, you are to delete the local copy and note the timestamp in the secure log. Do not attempt to enhance or isolate the audio. 14. Remember, the ice is silent. The drill is loud. Anything else is a malfunction of your equipment or your senses. Treat it accordingly. I finished reading. The silence in the mess module was absolute, broken only by the ever-present, almost subconscious vibration of the Station S generators. This is a lot of malfunction, I said finally. Shaw leaned back. We re-drilling into the oldest, most isolated place on Earth. We are pressing on a door that hasn't been opened in geological time. Malfunctions happen. These procedures keep us safe, and they keep the science clean. Do you understand? I needed the money. My student debt was a mountain that made 2 miles of ice seem manageable. I nodded. I understand. Good. Burn it to memory. The laminate stays here. He took the sheet back. The first loop, the water inventory. My shift was the graveyard, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The drill ran on its own, a robotic serpent chewing downward. My job was to monitor the feeds, log the core lengths, and manage the water. The meltwater from the thermal drill was supposed to be pure, sterile, just ancient H2O. It flowed up a separate conduit, was filtered, and collected. Per Rule 4, it went into the blue canisters. The first inventory was at 7 a.m., shared with the day shift lead, a geologist named Petrova. She was all business, her movements economical. Locker 4B was in a short service corridor that branched off the main connecting spine of the station. The door was unremarkable, marked with a stenciled 4B. Inside, it was cold, just a narrow space with shelving. The blue canisters were lined up, 20 of them, each with a sealed cap and a dated label. Petrova counted them aloud, tapping each one. 20. Seals intact. She then checked the logbook mounted on the wall, comparing the count to the previous entry. She initialed it and handed me the pen. Your turn. Verify. I counted. 1, 2, 3. I reached 20. The seals were tight, a small pressure indicator on each cap showing green. 20 verified, I said, signing. Remember, she said, her voice low, it's just water, but it is their water. It stays here. She didn't elaborate on who they were. The ICE? The grant committee? She left, and I followed, sealing the corridor door behind me. That night, at 2:17 in the morning, the transfer pump from the borehole to the filtration unit clogged. A light flashed on my board. Standard issue. I radioed Shaw, who was catching a nap in his bunk. Pump 7 is down, going to silo to clear it. Copy. Lawson is in the sensor bay. Take him with you. I collected Lawson, a quiet engineer from Norway. We suited up in the intermediate, just heavy overalls, not full exterior gear, and entered the silo. The drill tower rose through the center of the high-ceilinged module. A colossal thing of black steel and ceramic. The sound was a physical thing. A deep, resonant thrum from the drill, and the hiss of superheated steam. The clog was at a junction valve. As I worked, my headlamp beam played over the floor grates. Something glistened. A trail of water droplets leading from the base of the drill casing toward the sealed door of the service corridor. The blue canisters were stored in that corridor. I sealed them myself at shift start. The trail was fresh. I pointed it out to Lawson. He looked, his face impassive under his lamp. Condensation drip from the steam vent. It's irregular. I'll note it for the day crew to mop. His voice was calm. He didn't move to follow the trail. Rule 11 flickered in my mind. If you encounter another team member in a module where their schedule does not place them, but Lawson was supposed to be here, I called him here. I finished clearing the clog. The pump churned back to life. We left the silo. As the heavy door sealed behind us, I glanced back through the porthole. My headlamp beam, now indirect, caught the glisten of the water trail. It seemed to have grown, a darker patch on the grate. I turned away. The next morning, at inventory with Petrova, I counted 21 canisters. I stopped at 21, my finger hovering over the last one. Petrova watched me, her expression unreadable. Problem? I count 21. She didn't look at the canisters. She looked at the logbook. The log says 20. Your count yesterday was 20. My count now is 20. Her voice held no room for argument. Recount. Slowly. I counted again, starting from the left. 1, 2, 3. My mouth went dry. There were 20. The 21st canister was gone. The space where I'd seen it was empty. A faint, damp ring marked the metal shelf. 20, I said, my voice tight. The cold place, tricks on the eyes. Fatigue. She initialed the log. Sign, I signed. My hand was steady, but my mind was racing. Had I imagined it? The trail of water, the extra canister, it was a pattern of malfunction, just as Shaw said. A trick of the light, of a tired brain in a sterile, repetitive environment. I chose to believe it. The second loop, the chronometer and the footsteps. My personal wristwatch, a cheap digital thing, began to lose time. Not much. A few seconds over an hour. I noticed it when I compared it to the master clock during my hourly log entry. The discrepancy was 18 seconds. I thought nothing of it. But the next hour, it was 40 seconds slow. Then a minute and 10. I showed it to Shaw during shift change. He didn't look at the watch. He looked at me. Rule 2, synchronize your chronometer. Your watch is malfunctioning. Rely on the station clock. He handed me a bulky, military-style digital watch. Use this. But why would it slow down so consistently? I pressed. Cold. Battery. Magnetism from the drill. It's a malfunction. His tone ended the discussion. I took the watch. It was synchronized to the millisecond with the master system. My cheap watch I left on my bunk. When I returned after my next sleep cycle, it was gone. I never asked about it. The new watch kept perfect time. It also had a stopwatch function and a countdown timer. I found myself using the timer for small tasks, a way to impose order. Boil water for tea, 3 minutes. Review sensor logs, 15 minutes. It was during one of these timed sessions, a week later, that I first heard the footsteps outside the schedule. I was in the geology lab running a spectral analysis on a core slice. The lab was at the end of a spoke module, separated from the main spine by a 20-foot corridor. According to the station schedule, I was the only person assigned to this module between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. At 1:48 a.m., I heard the distinct sound of bootsteps in the corridor. Not the heavy tromp of someone in exterior boots, but the softer sound of interior liners. They walked from the spine toward the lab door. They stopped right outside. Rule 11. If you encounter another team member in a module where their schedule does not place them, do not engage them in conversation. Acknowledge them with a nod only, and exit the module within 2 minutes. I looked at the door. The handle didn't move. No knock. I held my breath, the spectral analyzer humming quietly. I set my chronometer S timer. 2 minutes. I waited. At 1:49 and 30 seconds, the footsteps walked away, back down the corridor. I exited the lab at 1:50 a.m. on the dot. The corridor was empty. I reported the encounter to Shaw in my post-shift log. He read it, gave a single nod. Noted. Lawson was doing a non-scheduled check on the corridor heating elements. He must have forgotten to log it. I didn't believe him. Lawson's bunk had been occupied. I'd seen his shape through the curtain when I passed by. But I said nothing. Malfunction. Misperception. The third loop. The dreams and the hydrophone. I'd have been having the dreams, but hadn't reported. They were vague at first. A sense of immense weight, of blue darkness, of something vast and patient observing me from behind a wall of cloudy ice. I'd awake with a start, my ears ringing with the echo of the drill, which was impossible as the HAB modules were soundproofed. After the watch incident, they sharpened. In the dream, I was not myself. I was a point of consciousness descending through infinite layers of blue, pressure mounting. A terrible cold that was not unpleasant, but absolute. And there was always the sense of the observer. Not a shape, but a presence, like a mountain that had decided to pay attention. I did jerk awake, gasping, and for a few disoriented seconds, I'd feel a profound gravitational pull toward the center of the station, toward the silo. After the third consecutive night, I told Shaw. He didn't seem surprised. Recurrent? 3 nights now. Always descent. Always being watched. He made a note on a secure tablet. Increase your physical exertion before sleep. The mind gets idle down here. It fabricates stimuli. The observation trope is common in isolation studies, projecting a witness to your own loneliness. Rule 9 says to report it. You have. Consider it logged. Dante, dwell on it. Dwell on the core density readings from Sector G. He walked away. Part of my duties involved a weekly review of the borehole hydrophone ambient recordings. It was a tedious task, listening to hours of creaks, pops, and the distant groan of shifting ice, annotating any anomalies that could indicate structural stress on the borehole wall. I was using noise-canceling headphones, scrolling through waveforms on the screen. I was at the 2-hour mark of a recording from 3 days prior when I heard it. Beneath the usual symphony of ice, a pattern emerged, a series of faint, resonant taps. Tap, 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 spaced roughly 2 seconds apart. It lasted for 17 taps, then stopped. My skin prickled. Rule 5, rhythmic tapping sound, described as similar to a metal spoon on ice. I made an annotation, possible recurrent acoustic anomaly, low frequency. Taps, duration 34 secs. I kept listening. 10 minutes of silence, then a new sound. A long, low-frequency moan, like a colossal stone door grinding on its hinges. It faded. Then, clear as a bell amid the noise, a vocalization. It was not a word. It was a phoneme, a fragment, a wet, guttural coo sound, followed by a hissing exhalation that. It sounded like it was uttered right into the microphone, 2 miles down. My blood went cold. Rule 13. If you hear a vocalization, you are to delete the local copy and note the timestamp in the secure log. My hand hovered over the delete key. This was data. This was potentially monumental. A non-human vocalization in deep Antarctic ice. It could be contamination, some bizarre artifact, or it could be the discovery of the century. I highlighted the audio segment. I could just save a copy. For later analysis, for proof. The memory of Shaw S. granite face, the laminated list, the extra canister that wasn't there, the footsteps that belonged to no one, it all coalesced into a cold lump in my stomach. This wasn't about science anymore. This was about containment. I deleted the local file. I opened the secure log, a simple text file with no network access. I entered the date, the timestamp. 0400 hours, Sector 7 hydrophone. Anomalous phoneme detected. File purged per protocol. 13. I felt no pride in my compliance, only a deep, unshakable dread. I had just destroyed evidence of something unimaginable because a rule on a laminated sheet told me to. And I knew, with a certainty that settled in my bones, that it was the only correct action. The fourth loop, the storm and the void. The temptation came during a storm, a screaming katabatic wind that scoured the surface, dropping the external temperature to -70 and sealing us in for a predicted 48 hours. All surface travel was banned. The station creaked and groaned under the wind-s assault. The world shrank to the vibration of the hull and the constant data stream from the drill. It was during this storm that we hit the 2-mile mark. A cheer went up in the control module, tired but genuine. We were entering uncharted ice, layers that had never seen the atmosphere. The core samples coming up were otherworldly clear, containing strange, elongated bubbles of ancient air that shimmered like pearls. The procedures tightened. The 45-second transfer window felt like a heartbeat. We worked in pairs, a ballet of precise movements. Receive the core sleeve, verify seal, open chamber, transfer, seal chamber, log. The blue canisters in locker 4B began to fill faster. The daily inventory showed no discrepancies, but the damp ring on the shelf never fully went away. On the second night of the storm, the comms with McMurdo became spotty, then died. We were on our own. Shaw's jaw was permanently clenched. The drill thrummed on, a relentless heartbeat. At 1:15 in the morning, the thermal camera feed went black, not gray, black, a perfect absolute absence of light. I checked the diagnostics. The camera was powered, transmitting, but receiving no light. I watched the clock. 60 seconds. The drill was still turning, melting its way downward into that darkness. My hand hovered over the drill stop control. Rule 1. If the feed displays a solid, dark gray void for a continuous period exceeding 90 seconds. This was black, not gray. Did that matter? The drill diagnostics were green. We were making progress. Stopping the drill was a complex process. Restarting it could take hours in this cold. It could jeopardize the borehole stability. It could delay us, cost money, look bad on my record. 70 seconds. The black on the screen was hypnotic. It was ecstatic. It had a texture, a slight grain, like looking at a starless sky through a veil of oil. I realized I was leaning forward, my nose almost touching the screen, trying to see into it, to find an edge, a shape, anything. 80 seconds. A thought, clear and alien in my mind. What if it's not a malfunction? What if we've finally melted through? What's on the other side? 90 seconds. My finger stabbed the stop button. A loud, hydraulic groan echoed through the station as the drill head ceased its rotation. The silence that followed was more alarming than the noise. I initiated the full-spectrum sonar ping. A deep thwoop sound emanated from the silo, felt through the floor more than heard. I watched the sonar screen. The wave traveled down, painting the familiar cylindrical geometry of the borehole on the scroll. 2 miles of clean, solid ice return. It reached the terminus. The return signal should have been a sharp, bright peak. It was a smear. A broad, confused echo that suggested a cavity or a rough surface or something that scattered the sound. The paper scroll chattered out the readout. I compared it to yesterday's as per Rule 10. The terminus return was now 22 meters shallower than the previous reading. A discrepancy exceeding 10 meters. My radio crackled. Shaw's voice tight. Report. Camera blackout at 1:15. Drill stopped at 1:16 and 30 seconds. Sonar initiated. Return is ambiguous. Discrepancy of 22 meters on borehole depth. I am on my way. Do not resume drilling. By the time he arrived, the thermal camera feed had returned. It showed the smooth, melted walls of the borehole, illuminated by its own IR light. Everything looked normal. The sonar smear was the only anomaly. Shaw studied the scroll, his face grim. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he pulled out his secure tablet and typed. He showed me the screen. It was a new list. Amendments, he said quietly. A1. The sonar anomaly you observed is designated a Class 2 acoustic ghost. It is a known, if rare, phenomenon caused by stress fractures in the deep ice, reflecting sound anomalously. If it occurs, follow procedure A2. A2. Following a Class 2 ghost, the drill is to be put in a holding pattern for no less than 8 hours. During this time, continuous passive hydrophone monitoring of the borehole is to be maintained. 2 personnel minimum in control at all times. A3. All personnel are to undergo a biometric spot check, heart rate, pupil response. Following a ghost event, report any feelings of magnetic attraction toward the silo or feelings of intense drowsiness. A4. The blue canister inventory is to be increased to every 4 hours. A5. The service corridor containing locker 4B is now off limits to all personnel not on the inventory shift. The door is to be kept visually monitored via its camera feed at all times. I-6. If the hydrophone records a Class 2 ghost, and you subsequently hear rhythmic tapping in the station plumbing, disregard the 1-hour water cessation rule in Core Rule 5. Instead, initiate a system-wide water flush for exactly 3 minutes. Do this from the life support panel. Do it alone. I read them. A known phenomenon, I whispered. It's in the supplemental geophysical brief, Shaw said, but his eyes didn't meet mine. We proceed with caution. Always. The 8-hour hold was agonizing. The storm howled outside. Lawson relieved me for a few hours of fitful sleep. When I returned to the control module, he had the hydrophone feed piped into his headset. His face was pale. He handed me the spare headset. I put it on. The usual groans and creaks. Then, faint but clear, the tapping. Tap, 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 2-second intervals. It was different from the recording. It had a sharper, more metallic quality, and it seemed to be layered with another sound, a faint, wet drip in counter rhythm. Started about 20 minutes ago, Lawson murmured, not taking his eyes off the hydrophone monitor. It is getting clearer. I checked the time. We were 6 hours into the hold. Rule A6 was now in effect. If the hydrophone records a Class 2 ghost, and you subsequently hear rhythmic tapping, initiate a system-wide water flush for exactly 3 minutes. Do this from the life support panel. Do it alone. I have to go to life support, I said. Lawson just nodded, his attention locked on the audio. The tapping was a clock, counting down to something. The walk to the life support module felt longer than ever. The station seemed to hold its breath. The ever-present hum of the CO2 scrubbers was the only sound. I reached the panel, unlocked the polycarbonate cover. The tap, tap, tap was in my head now, a phantom rhythm matching my heartbeat. I found the purge switch. I threw it. A deep shudder ran through the station. Pumps screamed to life, a violent roar through the pipes. In my headset, the tapping was obliterated by a chaotic, rushing torrent of sound. For 3 minutes, the station vibrated with the effort, a beast clearing its throat. Then the timer cut the pumps. Silence rushed back in, deeper than before. The hydrophone feed was dead quiet, not a creak, not a pop. Just a soft, empty hiss, like the sound of falling snow. Lawson's voice came over the radio, shaky. It stopped. The tapping. Everything stopped. Shaw entered an hour later, his biometric scanner in hand. He checked my pulse, shone a light in my eyes. Report. Rhythmic tapping commenced at approximately 4 a.m. Initiated the system flush per A6. Tapping ceased. Hydrophone is now quiet. Any attraction to the silo? Drowsiness? I thought of the black screen, how ID wanted to lean into it, to fall forward. No, I lied. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. The hold is lifted at 9 a.m. We resume drilling. The 5th loop, basal ice and the first breach. We hit basal ice 3 days later. The storm had passed, leaving a surreal, blinding calm. The core sample that came up was different. It wasn't a pure ice. It was a dirty, dark slurry, streaked with bands of black sediment and tiny pebble-like inclusions that glittered under the lab lights. It smelled too, when we transferred it, a faint ozone and rotten mineral smell that the vacuum chamber hissed to contain. The celebration was muted. This was it, the bottom, the goal. Petrova, usually impassive, looked unnerved as she sealed the isolation chamber. The pressure is unstable, she said, reading the gauge. It's bubbling, off-gassing something the spectrometer doesn't recognize. Shaw ordered a full battery of non-invasive tests. No one was to open the chamber. The blue canister inventory was now every 2 hours. The camera on the service corridor door showed nothing but the closed door, but we watched it in shifts, a mind-numbing vigil. It was during one of these watches with Riley the medic that we had our first actual breach. Not of the station, but of a rule. Chen, the engineer, who had been growing increasingly twitchy, was on inventory duty with Petrova. We saw them enter the service corridor on the monitor. They counted the canisters. Then, instead of leaving, Chen did something inexplicable. He pointed to the damp ring on the shelf, then to the floor. He said something we couldn't hear. Then he took out his multi-tool, knelt, and began to scratch at the floor grate beneath the shelves. Petrova grabbed his arm. On the grainy video, we saw her mouth move in a sharp no. Chen shook her off. He pried up a small section of the grate. A geyser of black, viscous fluid shot up, hitting him in the chest and face. It didn't look like water. It looked thick, like oil, but it moved with a strange liveliness. Petrova stumbled back, slipping in the fluid, now spreading across the floor. Chen wasn't screaming. He was silent, statue still, the black substance covering his goggles and mouth. Riley was already on her feet, radio in hand. "Suit breach in 4B, chemical or biological exposure," Shaw's voice barked over the comms. "All personnel, stay out of the service corridor. Petrova, can you secure the door from inside?" On the camera, Petrova, her boots slipping, lunged for the door control panel. She slammed the manual close switch. The corridor door began to swing shut. Chen remained kneeling, a blackened figure. Just before the door sealed, he turned his head. Not toward Petrova, toward the camera. The black fluid coated his face, but we could see his mouth moving behind the smear, forming silent words. The door sealed with a final clang. The camera view was now just the closed door. Black fluid seeped from under it, spreading in a slow, thick tide into the main corridor. He looked at us, Riley whispered. The decontamination and containment procedures that followed were straight out of the standard manual, but conducted with a frantic urgency that betrayed their insufficiency. In full hazmat gear, Shaw and Lawson used absorbent pads and chemical neutralizers on the fluid in the main corridor. It was inert, they reported, just anomalous organics and sediment. The service corridor was sealed, its atmosphere vented and replaced. Chen-S body was recovered. The official log would later state he had been overcome by a sudden release of methane and hydrogen sulfide, a tragic accident. But we saw the footage. We saw his mouth move. When we were finally allowed back to our duties, Rule 11 had a new, unspoken weight. The amendment about monitoring the door was now a paramount concern, and the basal ice sample in Chamber Alpha continued to bubble. The pressure gauge slowly, inexorably, began to climb. The siege, the long night. It started with the carbon dioxide scrubbers. Their constant hum, the white noise of our lives, cut out, just stopped dead. The silence was a shock. I was in my bunk, trying and failing to sleep. I waited, counting. 1 1,000, 2 1,000. Rule 8 gave me 10 seconds. At 8 1,000, I was out of my bunk and moving. Do this alone. Do not discuss it while performing the action. The life support panel was in a small, cold utility module adjacent to the main hab. The station felt alien in the silence, every footfall too loud. I reached the panel. The diagnostic screen glowed green. All systems nominal. The scrubbers, according to the computer, were running. I could feel the dead air, already beginning to feel heavy in my lungs. I initiated the manual reboot sequence. It required a physical key turn, then a 30-second countdown. As I counted down from 30, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the corridor from the direction of the drill silo. Not the quick booted steps of Lawson or Shaw. These were heavier, wet, a squelch with each pace. 20. The footsteps stopped outside the utility module door. I could see a shadow under the gap, blotting out the faint light from the corridor. 15. A low, resonant thud shook the door in its frame. Not a knock, an impact like a heavy bag of wet sand. 10. The door handle, a simple lever, began to depress. Slowly, then it released, depressed again, testing the mechanism. 5. I finished the count. The reboot sequence engaged with a loud clunk. The blessed hum of the scrubbers shuddered back to life. The heavy air began to stir. The shadow under the door vanished. The footsteps receded, back toward the silo. The wet squelch was gone. Now they were just footsteps, echoing faintly until they were absorbed by the distance. I reported to Shaw, breaking the do not discuss clause out of sheer necessity. He listened, his face pale under the module lights. He didn't chastise me. He simply opened his tablet and showed me a new file, labeled Emergency Protocols, Siege Conditions. The external sensors showed another storm brewing. We were sealing ourselves in, for real this time. E1. All personnel are to gather in the main HAB module immediately. No one is to be alone for any reason. The main HAB door is to be sealed with the secondary magnetic lock once all are accounted for. E2. Portable power banks and the emergency radio are to be brought into the main HAB. All other modules are to be powered down to minimum life support. E3. One person must maintain visual contact with the internal camera feed of the service corridor door, camera 4B, at all times. Report any change in status. E4. The drill silo is declared contaminated. Do not attempt to access it. If any entity attempts to gain entry to the main HAB, ignore all verbal prompts. It is not crew. Maintain silence until it departs. E5. The basal ice sample in isolation chamber. Alpha is to be considered compromised. Do not attempt to jettison it. It is now an integral part of the Station S biosphere. Monitor its pressure gauge. If the pressure drops to 0, protocol is void. We gathered. There were 5 of us now. Shaw, myself, Lawson, Petrova, and Riley. We sealed the door. The magnetic lock engaged with a final sounding thunk. The main HAB was a 20 by 30 foot space, now crowded with gear, bunks, and a thick, shared fear. The camera feed from 4B was displayed on a small monitor next to the comm station. It showed the closed door, still streaked with traces of black from the cleanup. The siege lasted for 53 hours. Set piece 1, the voices and the door. The first 12 hours were a tense quiet. We took shifts watching the monitor, sleeping in fits, talking in hushed tones about everything except what was outside. Then the voices started. Over the main station intercom, which we had physically disconnected. The speaker grill emitted a burst of static that resolved into a whisper. It was Lawson S. voice, but stripped of accent and emotion. Thermal camera is clear. You can resume drilling. Resume drilling. Lawson, sitting across from me, flinched as if struck. I didn't. Shaw held up a hand, his finger to his lips. Rule E4, ignore all verbal prompts. The whisper stopped. An hour of silence later, it was Riley S. voice tinged with panic. My ankle is twisted. I am in the sensor bay. Can someone help? Please. It's so cold in here. Riley was sitting right next to me, perfectly fine, her face pale. She squeezed her eyes shut. We ignored it. The pressure of silence in the room was worse than the voices. It was a physical weight. Then, at 2:17 in the morning, the camera feed changed. The service corridor door, which opened inward, bowed slightly, as if a tremendous, steady pressure was leaning against it from the other side. The metal groaned audibly over the speaker. It held. A minute later, a single bead of dark, shiny fluid seeped from under the door, coalescing into a small, perfect hemisphere on the corridor floor. It did not spread. It just sat there, reflecting the camera's LED like a single, watching eye. "It is testing the seals," Shaw murmured, never looking away from the monitor. Set piece 2, the circle. After the door test, the voices ceased. A new sound began. Footsteps, circling the main HAB module. Our HAB was a modified shipping container, sunk into the ice, but surrounded by an insulated engineering cavity, then the ice itself. The footsteps walked on the exterior decking above us. Crunch, crunch, crunch. A slow, endless circuit. The sound was muffled, but unmistakable. It wasn't the wind. We counted them. One complete circle was 47 steps. They never deviated. 47 steps, a pause of exactly 30 seconds, then another circuit, for 12 hours. We took turns counting, the monotony a form of torture. The unspoken rule was clear. Count them, know its pattern. As long as it walked, it wasn't trying to get in. The count was our clock, our measure of safety. During the 18th circuit, Petrova, who was on watch, spoke without turning from the monitor. The fluid under the door. It's larger. We looked. The hemisphere had flattened and spread, forming a thin, dark puddle about 2 feet in diameter. It was perfectly still. Set piece 3, the breach and the pressure. It was Chen S.'s voice that broke us, or rather, broke Petrova. It came over the intercom, but this time, it was different. It wasn't a whisper. It was clear, conversational, and horribly wrong. "Hey, Petrova," it said, Chen's familiar cadence intact, but layered with that wet, static undertone. "It is not so bad. It's quiet. And you can see so much from in here. The patterns in the ice, they're beautiful. Open the door. I'm right outside. I'm so cold." Petrova had been the one to seal him in. She'd have seen him kneeling, blackened, silent. This voice, this sickening parody of her colleague, was too much. She let out a choked sob and covered her ears. "Just the magnetic lock," Chen's voice coaxed. "It's just a switch. My fingers are too stiff. Help me." Shaw moved to the comms station, his hand hovering over the master power cutoff for the entire module. A last resort measure that would kill lights, heat, everything. Then Lawson screamed, pointing at the service corridor monitor. "The door!" On the screen, the dark puddle was moving. It was flowing back, being sucked under the door from our side. As it vanished, the door to 4B began to open. Not with force, slowly, smoothly, inward. It was pitch black inside the corridor, and something was standing in the doorway. It was shaped roughly like a man, but made of shifting darkness and the glint of wet ice. It had no discernible features, just a suggestion of a head and shoulders. It stood perfectly still, facing the camera. The footsteps above us stopped. The thing in the doorway took one step forward into the main corridor, leaving a wet footprints on the floor. It didn't walk toward the main hab. It turned and walked, with that same heavy, deliberate pace, toward the drill silo. It disappeared from the camera's view. A moment later, the intercom voice returned, but it was no longer mimicking. It was a chorus of whispers, overlapping. A sound like ice cracking over a deep river. "Thank you for the key." That's when Petrova snapped. "It is just water. It's a leak." We're gonna suffocate in here being scared of a damned leak and a shadow." She lunged for the manual override on our own hab door magnetic lock before anyone could stop her. She slapped the release. The lock disengaged with a hiss. The door did not move. Petrova, emboldened by its seeming failure, grabbed the handle and pulled. The door flew inward, tearing from her grasp with impossible force. There was nothing in the doorway, just the empty, dimly lit corridor beyond, leading toward the control module. "See? Nothing," she shouted, her voice high with hysterical triumph. Then she was yanked. It was in pull. It was as if the space in the doorway contracted around her. 1 second she was in the threshold. The next, she was a blur, sucked down the corridor toward the drill silo with a sound like a giant inhaling. The door slammed shut. The magnetic lock re-engaged automatically. We were down to 4. No one spoke. We just stared at the door. The silence was absolute, more terrible than any sound. Shaw finally moved, his movements robotic. He checked the pressure gauge for the basal ice isolation chamber on his tablet. His breath caught. "It's dropping," he whispered, horror dawning, fast. The gauge read 50 pulsazioni, then 45, 40. It was falling by 5 pounds per second. Protocol E5. If the pressure drops to 0, protocol is void. Void meant what? We didn't know. We didn't want to find out. "It's releasing the sample," Lawson said, his voice hollow. "It's opening the chamber. It's letting it out." Shaw looked at us, his eyes sunken. "We have to repressurize it, remotely. The manual override is in the control module." The control module was 2 doors down, through the corridor from which Petrova had been taken. It was a suicide mission. But the alternative was the void of the protocol. The thing that had taken Chen and Petrova was in the station with us now. The rules were the only structure we had left. "I'll go," I heard myself say. My voice was calm, distant. "I know the panel. 2-person minimum for any movement." "Who S with me?" Lawson stood up. "I am." Riley began to protest, but Shaw silenced her with a look. "Take the UV lamps. The portable radio, channel 4. You have 5 minutes to get there, execute, and return. If you are not back in 10, we seal the door permanently and assume protocol void." We didn't speak as we prepared. We armed ourselves with the high-intensity UV flood lamps from the geology lockers. We reasoned that if this thing was born of ancient, lightless ice, light might be a deterrent, if not a weapon. We checked our chronometers, synchronized. 5 minutes. Shaw released the magnetic lock. The door swung open onto an empty corridor. The lights were at 50%, casting long shadows. The station hummed, a mockery of normalcy. The air was cold, and it smelled strongly now of ozone, wet rock, and something else, a sweet, cloying decay, like rotten fruit, frozen and thawed. We moved, back to back, sweeping the UV lamps ahead of us. The beams made the white walls glow an eerie purple-blue, bleaching all color. The control module door was 20 yards away. It felt like crossing a chasm. We were halfway there when the wall to our left bulged. Not a lot. Just a gentle, localized swelling, as if the insulated paneling had become soft as clay. A seam split with a plastic pop, and a trickle of black, sediment-laden water seeped out, running in a thin line to the floor. It was the same fluid from the canisters, from Chen. We kept moving, not running, our lamps fixed on the yeet, bulging wall. It subsided as we passed, the water flow stopping. We reached the control module. The door was ajar. Inside, the consoles glowed with standby lights. The main screen displayed the pressure gauge for Chamber Alpha. The red shoesy was blinking. 15 pise. I went straight to the manual override panel, a small dedicated console with a physical key slot and a 10-digit pad. Lawson covered the door, his UV lamp painting the corridor outside in stark, violent light. 1020. My fingers, numb with cold and a terror so deep it felt like stillness, fumbled the key. I got it in. I typed the standard override code Shaw had given us months ago. 5 Seowais. An error flashed on the tiny screen. Incorrect code. He changed it, Lawson hissed, his voice strained. After the breach, he must have changed it. 0 psi. The gauge blinked, then went dark. A flat, empty 0. A deep, shuddering clang echoed through the station, metal on metal, from the direction of the sample lab. The sound of a massive hydraulic seal disengaging. The sound of a door opening. Then, from the intercom in the control module, a new voice. It was Chen S again, but saturated with that empty, static whisper. Multiplied. Thank you, it said. The air is moving now. The station lights flickered, died, plunged us into a blackness so complete it was a physical substance. Our UV lamps were the only light, casting our own huge, monstrous shadows on the walls. Emergency batons snapped on automatically, casting a dim, bloody glow from the corners. From the corridor came a new sound, not footsteps, a slosh, a steady, advancing slosh, like a tide pool washing over rocks, but rhythmic, purposeful. It was coming from the direction of the silo, and it was getting louder. Go! I yelled. We ran, not back to the main hab, past it, toward the emergency generator room and the vehicle airlock at the far end of the station to see spine. It was the only way out. The sloshing followed, gaining. It wasn't fast, but it was relentless, a wave of sound filling the corridor behind us. I glanced back, shining my UV lamp. The corridor behind us was filling, not with water, but with a flowing black mass that had a surface like obsidian, but moved like liquid. It reflected our UV light in a million crazed purple pinpricks, like ice chips caught in oil. It wasn't just flowing. It was coalescing, forming tendrils that reached for the walls, the ceiling, pulling the main body forward. We reached the airlock, the final module. Lawson slammed his palm on the cycle button for the inner door. It hissed open. We fell inside, a small space barely big enough for 2 people in survival gear. I hit the manual close. The door slid shut just as the leading edge of the black mass touched it. Through the small, thick viewport, I saw it reach the door. It didn't Chongji. It simply spread over the window, blotting out the dim emergency lights, pressing, testing the seal. Lawson, breathing in ragged sobs, initiated the exterior door. Sequence. Alarms blared, unauthorized egress during a storm. We ignored them. The outer door cracked open, and a screaming gale of Antarctic wind filled the chamber, stealing our breath and frosting the interior glass instantly. We stumbled out into the storm, into minus 70-degree cold that felt like being slapped with 1,000 needles. The vehicle shed was a vague, dark shape 30 yards away, visible only as an absence of blowing snow. We ran, leaning into the wind, the cold searing our lungs. We didn't look back. We reached the shed, clawed open the door, fell inside. The relative silence was deafening. Lawson got the parked, tracked piston bully started. Its headlights cut twin cones through the swirling white. We drove, blind, following a pre-programmed GPS track Shaw had insisted we all memorize, leading to a remote emergency cache 15 miles inland. I manned the radio, sending a mayday on the dedicated, encrypted siege frequency he had given us, repeating a simple code phrase. Archimedes compromised. Protocol void. 2 survivors en route to Cache Bravo. We were found 12 hours later by a Twin Otter ski plane dispatched from McMurdo after our fragmented Mayday was received. We were half frozen, huddled in the piston bully, its fuel almost gone. We told them about a catastrophic biocontainment breach, a pressure failure, about Chen S and Petrova S accidents, about Shaw and Riley remaining behind in a sealed module. We stuck to the language of science and engineering failure. We said nothing about the rules, the voices, the thing made of black ice, the coda, the baton. The official inquiry was a long, quiet affair. The Archimedes station was declared a total loss. A remote team, months later, placed demolition charges and collapsed the borehole, then sealed the surface site with a reinforced concrete plug. The area was added to the permanent Antarctic Specially Protected Area Network, citing unique and fragile subglacial geochemistry with unpredictable reactive properties. A polite fiction. My debt was paid thanks to the hazard bonus and the quiet, substantial settlement that came with a non-disclosure agreement thicker than my thesis. Lawson returned to Norway. I heard he works in a hydropower plant, far from any ice. I sit now in a quiet, sun-drenched office in Christchurch, New Zealand. My job is logistical support for polar research grants. It is clean, quiet work. I am currently preparing the orientation materials for the new deep ice drilling proposal in Greenland. The project lead, a brilliant, eager woman named Dr. Eris, is thrilled. She talks of pristine paleoclimate records, of isotopes locked in time, of a horizon beyond 2.5 miles down. I have compiled the operational manual. The technical specifications are flawless. The safety protocols are exhaustive, peer-reviewed, compliant with every international standard. Now, I am writing the addenda, a separate document, not for the main binder. It will be printed on laminated cardstock. I am at my desk, the afternoon sun casting long shadows. I am choosing my words with the utmost care, with a precision honed in the deep dark. I am not writing from memory alone. I have Shaw S. secure tablet, recovered by the cleanup team, and, through channels I do not question, delivered to me. Its files are my reference. I am writing rules. 1. The drill head thermal camera feed is to be monitored at all times. I amend it slightly. Based on our experience, a solid, dark gray or black void. 2. All personnel must wear a digital chronometer. 3. Between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. station time, I write them all. The core 14. Then I add the amendments from the tablet, the ones Shaw showed me and the ones he did in T. I add the emergency protocols for siege conditions. I create a new section titled Extended Hold Procedures, detailing the steps for a sonar ghost event, the biometric checks, the increased inventory schedules. I count the items, 28 operational rules in total, each one testable, each one offense against the unimaginable. My hand doesn't shake as I type. My breathing is even. I feel nothing but a cold, clear focus. The nightmares still come, but they are no longer terrifying. They are procedural. In them, I am not descending. I am observing, logging, following the steps. The presence behind the ice is still there, but it is a datum, an anomaly to be contained. Dr. Eris will receive the laminate on her first day in the pre-deployment center. I will hand it to her personally. I will tell her it contains the accumulated, hard-won operational wisdom from prior deep ice campaigns. That it is to keep her team safe and to keep the science clean. I will tell her the ice is silent, the drill is loud, anything else is a malfunction of equipment or perception. And when she looks at me, her eyes bright with ambition and the thrill of the unknown, seeking the reason behind the rule about the blue canisters, or the dread implied in the amendment for the system flush, I will meet her gaze with the calm, hollow look I inherited from Shaw. I will not blink. I will let the silence, the heavy procedural silence, answer for me. It is a baton. I am passing it on.